All right, then, if we have our people here, then let's dive right in. So, you lean back in your chair, take a moment, and you close your eyes. And you feel as the air around you shifts just slightly. It's not particularly warmer or colder. It's not moving. Doesn't smell different. Somehow it's exactly the same as it just was, and yet it's different. And as you open your eyes around you, you see gray streets. See the tall foundations of buildings rising up. And this time, since the events of the last story, you think, this doesn't seem right. I think I know where this is now. As you walk up close to one of the sides, you look at the foundation, and you realize that it's not just solid. As you look at it, you see that it's bricks, fairly large ones, with, in some pieces, kind of intricate engravings on them in very, very loopy writing that, unfortunately, you cannot read. And as you look around behind you, you see as the road just kind of ends, maybe another 20 meters past. And as you go up to the edge, you see that it's broken, as a piece of it is still hanging on and fallen a bit, and in front of you is just void, as it goes up and down into the darkness further than you can see. You turn around and you start making your way back through the stagnant, dusty air, plodding along, your footsteps echoing, not loudly, just very slightly. And as you round a corner, see a light. Faint light, firelight. Very familiar at this point. You walk a few steps closer and you see the currently standing back, made of wood, with dark ash along the sides, with the door slightly off its hinges and the light coming from between the cracks in the boards. As usual, the door is slightly open. It's got this tiny crack to have the lights spill off into down the street away from you, further away. And for the briefest moment, as you blink and then it's gone again, it's for the briefest moment you see the shack, and then all light is gone, and then it's back to the way it was, and you're not sure if it was just a trick of your eyes or not. You're not sure about many things. This place feels familiar. And you walk in, you open the door, and sitting there are already a few figures. You've had this a few times, and in some of the stories there's been multiple figures. Last week there weren't any, but now you see a few figures sitting there. You see a somewhat older male person, and sitting along the sides you see familiar figures. You saw them the previous time. They were here the last times that stories were told as well. Didn't recognize them then, but you recognize them now, as there is an elderly lady sitting there in pastel orange robes with a small backpack and a bunch of pouches along the sides. Sitting next to her is a kid with dark brown tousled hair. It looks like it was cut, but maybe with scissors that weren't meant for it, and they just kind of thump all over the place. Sitting there in what seemed like kind of cargo shorts-ish, and a shirt, a little bit scuffed around the knees and elbows, although looking a little bit dirty. He's just kind of got dust all over the place. And sitting across from the fire, as ever, is Soren Lestrade. Not sitting there alone, though, this time. As he sits, a little bit of a hint of a smile on his face, with the graying beard and the cropped back hair. And sitting next to him, or more accurately, held up by Soren Lestrade, is he holds a skeleton. Just sitting on the log next to him, wearing the same clothes. A brown or light brown beigeish tunic with red lacing, and dark brown leather breeches, shoes, sitting there, and Soren the Star kind of looks over at the skeleton, and then he kind of like turns the head to make the skeleton look back. Yes, come in, come in. Have a seat. We have a few guests again today, though I think you might recognize them again this time. They come to visit every now and then. They like to keep me company sometimes. And now this one. It feels strange. You seem to have found me. This is a weird coincidence. And with that, that's just where he leaves it. As you sit down, you're expecting him to say more, but he obviously doesn't. He just clams up. And as you kind of look at him for a bit more, you feel just the smoke from the fire within the center, the little fire pit, coming up and makes your eyes tear a little bit, and you blink, and as you open them again, you're within the forest of bottles again. Around you, the logs have vanished. There's no more people, but then as you look around, you begin to see them. The others that were sitting around you, you see them kind of just wandering between the bottles, looking around. And you turn around and you see Soren Lestrade, without the skeleton this time. So, back we go, he says, holding the bottle. And for a moment, you're about to take it, but you take a moment. Just kind of think. You could swear that where you were just now was the same place that it had ended last time when you had ended in Solswyn. It couldn't be the same place, could it? At least you figured it couldn't. You figured Ruminara was just a story that Lestrade told. And yet now he was in his own story? You weren't sure. It was very strange. As you felt something around your feet, looking down, you saw that the thin inch-thick layer of water that's normally on this plane of the Forest of Bottles had a very slight current to it, moving towards you and then past you. And then looking around, you could see, within the light around you at least, you could see it moving not completely uniformly in the same direction, as here and there were small eddies and small pools as it whirled around and then continued going. Which is strange, because eddies and pools require there to be differences in the height of the layer that's underneath, but it wasn't. You look down and the entire thing is flat. It's just completely flat. You don't think that's entirely how physics should work, and yet this is happening. Soren the Star continues holding the bottle out to you. There's now 5 little lights in it. There's 4 very closely together within the center of the bottle. And then a little bit further down the diorama, you see one in the middle of the little ocean area that Solswyn was located in. You notice that the color of the lights in Noom, the Baron Storied lights, are all this kind of golden, glistening, yellowish, kind of like wheat in the sunrise. While the one over Solswyn is this brilliant blue. A lighter blue, not pastel, but this flashing, or this glinting light. You take the bottle. For a moment, you want to ask, where are we going today? But you figure you probably won't get an answer to it. You uncork the bottle, and the familiar feeling of as it pulls you, and you feel yourself falling into the bottle, see yourself outside of it and inside of it at the same time until fades, and around you is skyline. And below you, as you turn, falling, you see the realms of Ruminara. Once again, below you, overlaid, are the beautiful colors, although a little bit dampened this time. Looking around, you can see storm clouds over large portions of it. Especially the southern area. A lot of it is kind of cloaked in a bit more of a darker bluish hue. And yet falling, you feel comforted. It's nice coming back here. The first time it was a bit unsettling, and then with each time it just became more of a warm feeling coming here. Soren Lestrade kind of floats down next to you. So we're going a bit somewhere else today. We are going further westward, says as you fall, taking definitely more of an angled trajectory instead of going directly down. It moves closer to this large area. And you hear Soren's voice beside you. This is Felwyn. It's one of the largest empires, or countries, or whatever you wish to name it. It's gone through many phases within the realms of Ruminara. And perhaps it helps to understand how the time works here a little bit. There are 4 seasons, similar to what you would expect to understand as summer, winter, spring, and fall. But the time here has gone on far longer than ours has. Humans and many of the other species have existed here very long. We are now, at least this point of the story, is 9,349 post-Fractura. All that means is, once upon a time, something broke. And somebody decided that was the point to start keeping time. For a bit of reference, maybe, our story with Baron is almost 2,500 years later. 11,894 post-Fractura. A lot of time goes by here, and not much changes. Sometimes. For now, let me welcome you down further west. Far to the west as we can go here. Also very far south, as you fall further and you keep zooming towards the smaller area. The southern western corner with this really quite vivid green in the forest boughs and this beautiful swinging coastline. This down here is the Aldrin coast. Within are the Dunsett Plains. We have Torp and McKinleth and Koresh. We have the Shadowmar, which is an important place that we may return to. Many times. But for now, we're not going into the Shadowmar. We are going to this small city here at the base of the Shadowmar called Torp. See, the Shadowmar is a unique place. It has a way of magically affecting the things around it, and Torp is a city that's been here for a long, long time. And so, as could be expected, Torp has also seen its fair number of changes since it was first built. We follow today a creature. Maybe not a person, although it's hard to say. What do you define as a person within these realms anyway? As you fall, these last words of Baron fade out of your head. And you look around briefly, but he's not there anymore. And you feel yourself land with an intersection. Beside you, you see 3 large roads come together. Down 2 of them, you can see it go down to some walls. And down a third one, you see as looking down it, you feel like you see a large portion of the city. What it looks like to you is around you, there's many buildings, a very, very European style. They're built of timber and clay, mostly, with these intricate weavings of the timber pieces, placing them together into multi-story homes. The ones around you seem a bit shoddy. There's a lot of dirt and dust kind of caked along the sides of them. They look very, very reasonably similarly built, in the sense that there's not drastic changes in colors and there's not extreme intricacies. And as you look down this larger road into the city, what you can see is, to a portion, more walls. As The walls kind of reach higher here than the ones that you see down the other two roads. And then past that, you can see another set of walls as you've got this tiered system of walls going up in 4 sets. There's the ones that you're on, and there's one more layer, and a third layer, and then rising above that, you can see a castle, right in the center of Torp. And as you're standing in the center of this intersection, around you, many, many people of all different kinds. You see a decent number of humans, but you also see dwarves, and you see gnomes, and you see elves, and you see drow. You see giants. Not fully grown giants. Goliaths. The offspring of giants. Smaller. But still massive in comparison to everyone else that's walking down these streets. And then flitting between these, every now and then you can see a creature which must be maybe only barely larger than your upper arm. Some of them running on the ground faster than you'd expect that creature to be able to run. And some of them flying, and for a moment you don't, or most part you don't even see it, and then on one of them, just barely you can see like hummingbirds' wings flapping at such speeds that you can't actually tell the shape of them, just and eventually you catch hold of one of them, kind of, or it doesn't flit past faster than you can get it, and you kind of tail on. Before you is, it looks kind of, it's got humanoid features, but you see that especially the underarms and underlegs are longer than proportionally expected. It's got fairly short upper arms and upper legs, and then it has these long spindly hands, fingers, and lower arms. And it's extremely thin, to the point where even underneath the admittedly fairly tailored clothes on this one at least, you can see fairly strong jutting portions of ribs. Not that they're coming out, it's just strong bone structure. As also within the face you can see this, at least to you, it looks like a very stern face. It's very narrow chin and extremely wide around the top as it creates this cone downward, and then these almost spiky cheekbones, and then round towards the top. With some semblances of hair, although it doesn't seem kind of like the hair that you expect on... It's not like the hair you've seen on Baron, or on the elves, or on the humans of Solswyn, or on the gnomes that you saw when traveling with Baron. The hair is... It's thicker. They're almost like thin antennae that kind of stream backwards in a bit of a hair form. And you notice this also especially since creature is just kind of flitting around. It's not going somewhere directly. It's very fast, though. The only reason you managed to reasonably catch hold of it is because it stopped. Or didn't directly stop, it started flitting around circular, looking for something within the center of this intersection. And as it stops for a moment, what you can see is the hair kind of whoop, and moving around, trying to grasp something, or look at something, find something, you're not sure. And then they lay themselves back down, and you watch as it starts flitting down a street. And it caught you off guard, and it almost loses you. But you manage to get the moment, and you start sprinting after it, not taking heed of anyone in the streets. And to be honest, if you weren't a mostly ethereal mass of something, you probably would have annoyed a lot of people and never would have gotten through. But as it is, something about you is, you're just small enough or thin enough, even though you aren't necessarily. You just kind of squeeze yourself past people regardless of how much space there is. You just automatically manage to get through it. Not that you're going through people, you're going through the spaces. But it doesn't matter how small it is, it's like you kind of adhere to form into the space that you're going through to just past. And as you follow it, you watch as it goes down this central portion, and along one of the side things, just barely as you're running, you see a sign, on which you can read the Broad Marcade. Seems to be the name of the street. And along the sides, there's several streets going down, off into different directions. From here, you can see a lot of the walls reasonably. And you see as this fairy creature flits forward, going down the Broad Marcade, towards the larger wall going up to the second tier of the city. Flits through the entrance, up the stairs, up to the second portion, and as you follow it in, you see you're in another portion of the city. It definitely feels different as well. The people walking around here are a little bit more neatly clothed. You can see that a lot of them are taking more time. Not much. Some are still striding decently, but a lot of them are not rushing places. They're not shouting and all of that. It's a little bit calmer. And as you look around at the houses, you see as every now and then some of the houses are in reds and greens and yellows and oranges. Just the clay is colored in some portions. You see some of them have balconies coming out over the top, or in some of the roofs you see just holes in the roofs, and you see like this balcony opening that's built into the roof. Fascinating constructions to you. It's really quite beautiful. As you continue down, eventually running past, as you had gotten through the gate, you see a larger sign along one of the walls, which says the Anlay Ward. Because it's probably the name of the tier, you're not sure. Continue running down the broad marcade, following this creature. And as it flits forward, you come to an intersection as the broad marcade seems to continue down, and a little bit of a narrow form seems to lead upward in a steep angle to your right. And looking up it, you see as the creature flits up, going past, and you see another set of walls. And beyond it, through the gate, you can see just barely many ornate houses. And you kind of go up to it, and you luckily can just pass through. Just as this creature did as well. No one seemed to stop it, but you can see how there are several people here that seem to want to go through and are not allowed, as there's a few guards stationed outside and they won't let them through. And along the side you see two things, one saying the Narrow Marcade, which you figure is the name of the street, and a larger sign, very ornately carved in brass, it's kind of embossed a bit, in which you can read the Bow Ridge Ward. And ahead of you, down the center of the Narrow Marcade, you see rising up the castle. And for a moment, just judging by the path that this creature is taking, you imagine it just continued down the Narrow Marcade and up to the High Court of Torp, up to this castle. But it doesn't. It goes down about halfway, and then it drastically bends off to the left. And as you follow it, you go between these ornate houses, which are some of them have purples and blues and reds and yellows, and they're extremely flashy in a lot of ways, but not necessarily glaringly so. All of the colors are strong, but they're intricately worked in such a way that it works with the color of the wood and the color of the clay, and it works with the style of the doors and the windows, with the balconies, with the plants. And that's another thing you notice here. There's a lot of plants, as many of the buildings seem to have vines of different kinds and plants of different kinds growing up the walls. What seems random at first, but as you look closer, you see that it is actually, you realize more and more that it's orderly. It's orderly in a very unique way as it climbs up each of the beams around the sides and upward. Kind of like a bonsai. Extremely well tended to look lifelike and yet not wild. And as this creature flits through a few places, it then stops in front of a house for a moment, and then knocks on the door. The house is this beautiful violet color with this dark mahogany wood. And growing up around it are these vines, and out of it are really, really pretty blue and purple flowers, which the center is this purple, and then it goes outward, it goes into this really nice radiant blue. And it's like these dots all along the side of this purple wall, just these flashes of blue against the dark purple and the dark mahogany. And after the knock, the door opens, and standing on the inside of a reasonably lit house, seems that a decent bit of light comes in through the windows, is what feels like the oldest man you've ever seen. And then you look closer and you see he's a little bit hunched, but he's still fairly tall. If he weren't hunched, he'd probably be close to 2 meters tall, maybe even taller. And just barely from behind this fairly poofy gray-white hair, almost silver in the light when he moves out a bit, this hair kind of waves and poofs down past, and you see as it goes down to his knees almost. Extremely long hair and this really long beard that just kind of sweeps a bit. It looks a little bit unkempt, which you're surprised at, given the rest of this area that you've been in. And behind these kind of scratched up glasses that you can see one of the lenses has a crack along the side, you can see these. They look almost black, and you figure they're brown at the beginning, but you look closer just for the moment that you can, you see that they're actually this extremely deep reddish color. And his ears, you notice, are kind of pointy, and you realize this is an elf. And you'd seen a few elves further in town, and oh boy, how old must he be to look old as an elf? Because he looks truly, truly ancient. As he opens the door, you hear him speak, and his voice sounds older than the trees. It really does. As he speaks, it sounds like it sounds like the shifting of rocks, almost, kind of. It is such an old, kind of grating sound. Oh, yes. All right, Alira, come in. As he kind of beckons her in, and you just kind of swoosh through the doorway as well, as you figure this creature is called Alira. Just before you enter, as he's already kind of closing the door, and you're like, oh, I need to get in. But something catches your eye? Not entirely. It's not that you see it. You sense that it's there. A bit of a mixture of seeing, smelling, and just kind of feeling. You realize there's some extremely faint kind of maybe dust in the air, or pollen, something of the kind. Not much. It's just a bit, and it's strange. Can't quite put your finger on what it is. It seems like it could be pollen of a kind, maybe. Strange. As you walk in, you begin to follow a conversation between Alira and this old man, who Alira then seems to name. It seems to just called Old Man most of the time. But at one point a name falls, as you hear that his character's name seems to be Numel. Alright, Alira. I have something for you to do. It's very important. I know you don't like being told to do things. Look, it'll be fun. I'm aware that you don't care. I know that you don't want to do this simply because I told you that you need to do it. But please, listen for a moment. It's important. I have a few friends in the Shadowmar. Or close to it. And they tell me that strange times are ahead of us. I need to know what they meant, but I can't come in contact with them right now. I would ask you to please go and learn what it's about. Yes? If you do, I'll give you some of those nice roots you like. But don't tell anyone. I know you're not supposed to have them. You know you're not supposed to have them. Arthur. For a moment, Illyra seems to be kind of torn about whether they actually want to do it or not. There's absolutely nothing stopping them from doing it. And you can tell from the way they are that the only reason they're considering not doing it is because it'd be funny to not do it because they were asked to do it. Genuinely the only reason that's keeping them. But the thought about whatever roots that this old person, that Numel seems to have mentioned, seem to weigh over, as must be something nice. And just as quickly as they entered, Illyra just whoop, out the door again. You have to sprint to catch up, and you feel pretty happy that, at least at the moment, you don't seem to be suffering the adverse effects of actually, well, having to sprint. You don't seem to get tired, and as you run past it, you see as they leave the door, go back down the path, back to the narrow arcade, out of the Boweridge ward, down into the Anlay ward, into the Broad Marcade. And this time, instead of going back the way they came, down the left path, they go right. And following it, you see as it seems to loop around, and it goes back down into the lowest area, the Sand Bay ward. You realize the Broad Marcade is just this giant looping street that goes around and comes back on itself. And as you're sprinting behind Illyra and they go flitting down this street, they reach an intersection. To your side, you can see the wall. And they wait for a moment, look down the intersection, and then they go out to start down the side and out the gate. And as you follow them, you realize the moment that you leave the gate, there's a lot less people outside. It's interesting. If remembering back to the Baron stories and to the places that you'd been, normally with the walls, there's generally settlements outside of it as well. And yet here, the moment you left the walls, nothing. There's very few people walking out here. There's a few guards positioned. There's no houses. It's just up to the wall, and then there's just wall. And ahead of you, you can see the road goes up, and ahead of you, still a distance off, you can see a tree line. Getting closer to it, interesting. These forests that you normally think of generally have a few different types of trees. You have oaks, and you have elms, and you have sycamores, and you have a few pines here, and you have conifers. Conifers, I mean. Not conifers, that's a different character. You have a bunch of different trees. Looking here, there's a lot more different types of trees. A lot of the trees are ones that you know. As said, you have the oaks and the elms, alders. You have some willows. And then as you look around, you see that just kind of between these here and there, there's like palm trees. You see like these tall growing trees that just have a trunk, and as they reach the top, they just branch out into the extreme flat. They're not like the kind of the bushy kind that you know. They're like savanna trees. And between all of these, you think you see a banana tree? Like the ridged, layered trunks, and then at the top it just kind of goes out in a bit of a palm sense. And between them, here and there, you see trees that you don't recognize in any regard at all. There's this one tree which looks like a massive fern. And the longer you look at it, the more your head hurts, because it looks like the fern goes out, but at each point where there's ferns, or where the leaves of the fern would come out, if you imagine the shape of it has the stalk, and then the fern leaves. Looking at the leaves, because they're fairly large, the massive fern just seems to have more ferns as the leaves. And it starts to hurt your brain looking at it too long, so you just kind of move away and you follow Illyra again, kind of moving up. And at this point, Illyra stops at the edge of the Shadowmar. The pathway leading inward, off into the distance between the trees. It seems fairly well kept. There's a few roots and things growing across it, but in general it's a decent pathway. It's also fairly wide. 4 or 5 meters wide. It's pretty big path, at least at this point. And along the edge of the Shadowmar, going off to the right, and then curving around the boughs, there's a secondary path. Fairly small, also reasonably traveled though. The question is, does Illyra walk around the Shadowmar to find who they're finding, or do they enter it? Let me move you over here. A very determined enter. So we have one vote for enter. Agreement so far. Alright, then I'm gonna go with that. That Illyra just takes the moment, looks down the side path, and you figure in their head it's like, I'm supposed to be finding someone. But if they're waiting outside the Shadowmar, they must be really boring. Let's go in. All the fun people are inside the Shadowmar. That's how it works. Whoop, straight in. And as you follow Illyra in, it's a different kind of feeling entering here. It feels very... That's how it works. It feels very arcane in the sense of mysterious. It feels old and it feels strange. Like, old is the wrong sense. It's more that it's old and yet somehow new at the same time. It's very weird. You feel like somehow the trees here feel older than the world, and yet at the same time there's some youth within them. With it building from within them, you see all these shrubs and you see ferns and you see a lot of different kinds of plants, and you feel timeless within here. Outside it was obvious, but then the moment that you enter, you lose all sense of when it is. You figure it's sometime during the day, but you're not even sure about that. And as you spend more minutes, and then as you continue following Illyra, this sense just heightens further and further until after about half an hour of following Illyra down this path, behind you, around you, there's just foliage of a myriad of kinds. You've lost all sense of where you're going, where you are, what this is. It's mystic in a way already. And Illyra only goes forward on this path for maybe about half an hour inward. And it winds enough that you can't see the entrance anymore, but you figure you're not too far in here yet. And they off to the right. And you look towards them and you figure, oh, there's going to be a path here. There's no path. They just flew over the foliage and into wherever they're going. You have no idea how they're keeping track of where they're going. You don't know if they even know where they're going. You really don't know. Thinking back to the events in Souls when you wonder if this is a good idea to go following random creatures into random areas again. You really aren't that sure. And then you go and dive right in. Because, as Illyra already seemed to notice, all the fun things happen in the forest. And as you kind of make your way through the undergrowth, which you figure would probably be a lot more difficult if you are sure. Making your way through the undergrowth is probably easier, you realize, than it would be if you weren't aided by some ethereal magic of some kind. And as you follow Illyria, you realize even they seem to have trouble going through the undergrowth here sometimes. As at some points there's just bramble thickets and there's just branches like creating a gateway, it feels like. But you do manage to make your way through. And it goes on for a while. It takes longer. And suddenly, you open out into an area. And you hadn't really realized, because you were trying to pay attention to where you were walking, you didn't realize how the area around you seemed to shift. Just a bit. Because around you, and you're very aware that it wasn't like this beforehand, the entire, you're in like a glade, an open clearing. And there's two things rather strange about it. The first thing is that all of the trees around this glade are autumn colored. There's an immense amount of yellows and oranges and reds and these beautiful vibrant colors, contrasted by the green that you had been through the entire time. It was lots and lots of greens before that, and now suddenly it's this autumn flash of browns and reds and oranges and yellows. That's the first strange thing about it. The second strange thing is, you want to say that it's a clearing, but it's not really. Because there's no trees here, that's true. But the entire clearing is filled with bushes of a lot of different colors. Most of them seem to be green, although all of them have flowers of various different kinds. There's some purple flowers and some blue flowers, some red and yellow, there's some teal flowers, and there's some almost like kind of neon flowers. There's all sorts of different kinds of flowers, different shapes, different sizes, different colors, and there's just this blanket of bushes, just like shrubs everywhere. And at this point, Illyria stops, kind of at the edge of the shrubs. There's this little portion where it goes over from the forest over into where this blanket of shrubs just happens. And you hear Illyria talk, and same as when they were talking to Numel, they have a very fast voice. It's like when you type and there's no spaces in anywhere. That's what it sounds like. Hey, so Numel sent me, and I know you guys have your things to do, and I don't care, but whatever, he told me to send you here because you had something to say to him, and I don't know what it is, so tell me. And there's a few more words tossed in there that you don't really recognize. They're not really part of your usual, I guess, vernacular, you'd say. And you're not really sure who Illyria is talking to. They just kind of shouted out into the clearing. And then you hear like a shifting, shuffling sound. As looking forward, you see all of this like entire blanket of shrubs just shifting. As the sounds of moving leaves and just the very brief, the sound of shifting, moving bark and wood, but not like the old slow kind, but more kind of the kind that you hear when you bend a stick. That kind of shifting sound. And then you see them begin to part, the shrubs, as there's this pathway going down the middle of them to a central area where a bunch of the shrubs seem to move off, and you see just like this group of shrubs which stays in the center of the area cleared of shrubs. It's an extremely strange sensation. You've never thought about shrubs as much as you have now. There's so many bushes. But Illyria makes their way down at the center, and you follow them. And at the center, as they continue shuffling and moving. And in the center, as you reach the area, you realize, is strange because you get some semblance of, I guess it would be majesty or something of the sort from these central shrubs. You have no idea by what by what you're able to tell this. They don't look particularly different, and yet they do. They feel more important than the other shrubs, which is a thing you never thought you'd hear or think. Some shrubs being more important than others. Trying to toss that aside and concentrate on the thing at hand, ahead of you, you hear the stains as leaves parting in a way. You hear words of some kind coming from the shrubs. You hate everything about being here at the moment. It's incredibly hilarious, and the thought that Elira had about all the fun stuff happening in the forest was probably completely accurate. It's probably also accurate to say that all of the weird stuff happens in the forest. And as they're speaking, you hear some words that you don't recognize in this kind of lilting tone. What you hear between them in words that you do understand, although you feel like it's still the same. You feel like it's still the same language, but you actually understand these portions as if for some reason they were speaking an older form of the language and they switched to some newer words in between. As you hear the words you hear Leora, what kind of shrine? What kind of shrine would you eat? Your bushes. What the heck? Huge one. Okay. So where do we build a shrine? Do we build one here? Do we build one in the city? Do we build one outside? Where does the shrine go? And then it's kind of quieted. The shrubs seem to be pensive for a moment. Well, either one could work. So where should Elira try to build the shrine? Should they decide to try and should they build one here in the glade? Or should they decide to build a shrine to a bunch of shrubs within the center of Torp? Temple in the middle of the city, hells yeah. Okay, that was also unanimous pretty fast. All right then. Elira thinks for a moment. Well, what's this shrine supposed to be for? What am I even building? Is this like supposed to be like a wood structure? Is it supposed to be like a tree? What kind of shrine do you imagine here? And then essentially the words that come back, although you don't really understand them this time, but you can tell by the vibe of the words, it's just essentially an I don't care. Which is very strange for a bunch of shrubs that decided that they wanted a shrine. This is a very weird situation. Illyria just kind of stands there for a moment, or floats, more accurately. Well, I guess I'm gonna build whatever the fuck I want to have. Okay? Can't stop me. It's gonna be what I want it to be, and if you're unhappy, well, tough patooties. That's the way it is. And they go darting out the out the glade again. And for a moment you're like, do I stay? As you're caught off guard and you realize as the shrubs just kind of begin just shuffling back together again, you're like, okay, let's not stay here, and you go darting after them. And the path back is uneventful for the most part. Or as uneventful as trying to jump through a bunch of bushes is at this point. Which at this point it takes you a bit longer because, well, Aelira seems to be having more problems. But for you, it's not more difficult than it was before. But at this point, you're actively trying to not touch any shrubs. Hi, welcome to the stream. And as you're going through, you're like actively trying to not touch any shrubs because you feel like there's something very strange about them at this point. Don't know what it is. So you make your way back to the central pathway. And as you arrive on it, Iliar takes a moment. And they're like, you know what? I don't feel like doing this. We're doing this the easy way. And you watch as they just, and they're gone. And you're like, what do I do now? What do I do about this? I'm in the middle of a fucking forest and there's nothing here. And so you take the moment, and then you go sprinting back down the path, hoping to get to Torp in time to, at least hopefully luckily see what's going to happen. And as you reach the edge of the Shadow Mar, you come out and a few things are different. As said, while you were in the Shadow Mar, you felt like you completely lost track of whatever time it was. And as you reach the outside, you realize that it's almost sundown already. It's significantly darker at this point. The other thing you notice, and this seems to be more obvious in this glistening light, although you also figure it seems to be more of it, there's a lot more of this dust pollen thing happening as just kind of shifting through the air. As it doesn't seem to, it seems to fall slightly and then rise with air currents. And it's already out here, outside of the city. And as you make your way back into the city, you can see the entire city is full of it as well. It's not having too much of an effect on you, although it does make you feel a little bit woozy. Like everything seems to, like when you have had some alcohol, not too much, but enough to the point where when you move, everything seems to move a little bit further than you intended to. That's kind of the feeling that it's giving you. And as you enter Torp, you make your way through, and then you see that this kind of circle is opened up around the intersection that you had first found yourselves in, by the Sand Bay Ward, where the Broad Marquet first branches off of this path going from one end of Torp to the other. And as you reach this circle of onlookers, you see that within it, central area, and in the center of it, you see Aelira and several of these fairy creatures doing something. You make your way closer, and nobody seems to stop you, even though there's nobody in the center of the circle. And whatever they're building is really wacky to you. Because what it looks like is several of them, it's like it's kind of a tree growing, or several little saplings growing, a lot faster than they should be, for starters. And as they're growing, you see as the fairies, kind of under the guidance of Aelira, they're kind of weaving the trunks in lots of different ways, making like these Celtic knots in the trunks of the trees as they weave between each other and grow upwards. And then as it begins to grow, you watch as these knots within the tree are solidified as it starts to get broader, and branches are coming off. And at this point, the growing slows down a bit. You figure not necessarily because it can't grow as fast as it was beforehand, but more because the pixies, who seem to be doing some kind of magic here, deliberately don't want it to grow as quickly, because with the amount of them, they begin weaving together the branches and putting together things as the entire tree that's growing here, or actually this conglomerate of probably 5 or 6 different trees that are all put together in some way, as this gnarled, knotted, weaving thing moves its way up. And at the beginning it wasn't as obvious, but now, as they've done a few patterns now, you can see portions within the tree where nothing's growing. There's just these holes where the tree grows around them, kind of creating this pocket in a few like bulbous areas. And as the tree gets thick enough, as it reaches maybe half a meter or a 3/4 meter width, once the Lyra kind of floats down, they let the others do all of their things. As the tree continues growing, the Lyra kind of opens their hand and whoop, you see this globe of light pulsing very slightly. They kind of whoop, and pop it into one of the sockets. They open the other hand. Whoop. This time another glowing orb, but more of a greenish lit color, and into one of the pockets. And they begin doing this for a lot of the pockets as they begin filling 5, 10, 15, 17, 18 pockets. And the tree's grown pretty large at this point. You see as some of the guards are coming up because this is the center of a thoroughfare. There shouldn't be a tree growing here. And as they come closer, some of the pixies just kind of turn around and they like fliddle with their extremely thin fingers. And the guards just begin to stand. They kind of drop the weapons or whatever they were holding, and their eyes just kind of glaze over as they're standing there. And at this point, you notice something interesting to begin to happen. I mean, for the first point, the tree is just growing upwards, and it's pretty massive at this point. Thankfully, the thoroughfare is a large area, since most of the streets intersecting here are all probably 5 to 6 meters in width, and so the central thoroughfare is actually more of a plaza. And so people still manage to find their ways around it. But there is still a whopping giant tree within the center of it, and some of the carts might have problems making it away. You realize that Aelira really doesn't care. There is absolutely nothing stopping them from doing this. In fact, if someone were to try and stop them, they'd probably do it all the more. The other thing you notice happening is that the dust is getting stronger, and with it kind of weighing down somewhat, others don't seem to notice it, or don't seem to notice the dust, but you realize as a lot of people, or a lot of the onlookers, just start doing kind of wacky things. This one person with like this, it looks like a mixture of an accordion and a drum. It's kind of got the accordion bit on one side, and the other one where you'd expect to be able to press and such, there's the drum section, and the entire center of the accordion seems to be hollow. And as they grip the side of the accordion and they press, this drum portion bumps out, and it starts making this, to you at least, somehow really unpleasant whining sound. And you're like, why? You realize that this is probably an instrument. It looks like it could be one. But you don't know how this sound could be appealing. And then as the first whine happens, they kind of twist it a bit and press and then kind of do this accordion motion with it. And then beside the whining sound, that whining sound continues. And then overlaid over it in many, many tones, it starts... You can hear the person playing a melody of some kind. It's this lilting, kind of swooping melody. And underneath is this whine. And at the very basis of it, you can hear just these subtones just kind of reverberating throughout everything. And as this musician begins to play this strange instrument that they have, you see as some people just kind of begin to dance. Not 100% sure why people are suddenly so happy or so giddy. And then as some of the people begin to dance, you see as some of the people dancing and some of the people that aren't just kind of toss off their clothes. And at this point, you're really confused, as some of the people just begin dancing naked, some are just dancing, some are just naked. Some people just kind of lie down on the ground and they're just kind of there, experiencing. And at this point, you see as 2, 3, or 4 different musicians show up as well and begin playing. And for a moment, you're hopeful that they'll begin playing together and somehow all of this will come together. But they don't. All of the 4 musicians are playing different tunes in different times, everything's discordant, and nobody seems to care. Which is really weird. And all the while, this tree is continuing to grow in the center of the thoroughfare. As this continues, you realize that some people are just kind of instead of dancing anymore, they're just kind of jumping up and down. Not sure why. That is 100% accurate, yes. Some people are just jumping up and down. There's some people that, like, you see some people who just kind of seeing the tree growing faster again at this point, with the fairies seem to be done with their at least beginning portions. Some people just kind of grab a hold of branches and while it's growing, it just pulls them upward until they're hanging like several meters in the air. Everyone's just doing very strange things. And then from between all of these, you see a figure walking up. Kind of hunched, but still fairly tall, moving slowly, as you see the old man, Numel, walking into the center. And he looks around for a moment, and then he begins saying, Elira! Elira! Oh dear, as Elira is not paying any attention at all at this point. Elira is among the ones who seems to have, at least of the things that they had on, they stripped and are now currently dancing in the air in this very weird way that it's like they're dancing, but they keep twirling around their axis in many different situations. It's really it's really disconcerting to watch. And Numel just kind of stands there. Should have figured that when I get a message from a bunch of shrubs, it's not going to be good. Although I figure this isn't too bad either. It's okay. They've done worse. And for that, he takes a moment and then he begins to turn and act as if he's leaving again. Then he stops. He turns back to Elira. You know, I haven't had a festival like this in a long time. Perhaps I can help, as he rolls up his sleeves a little bit and kind of makes himself ready, and he does this kind of like bobbing motions with his shoulders. And as he does that more with his fingers kind of weaving a bit, within the center, like the same globes of light that Elira had created are just popping up everywhere between his hands. Like tens, dozens, and then eventually hundreds, as there's just huge amount of light. And then he just kind of whoop, and from between his hands you can see this radiance, this just flash of all the colors. And he holds it there for a moment. And this time he's like, Elira! 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 You might like this. And it takes him a few calls, but Elira takes the moment between dancing to look down. Poof! He says, and he opens his hand, and the lights just go like a firework in the center of people, although it doesn't seem to hurt anyone as they just go everywhere. A few of the lights kind of hit someone, and the funniest thing happens as this like purplish light comes towards one of the onlookers, just kind of standing there, and it hits them in the forehead, and it just kind of poofs off, and they've got this streak of light going down their forehead and down their hair, which is still glowing with the same radiance, as this ball of light just seems to have plastered itself to their head. And all around, just there's this massive, pretty crazy festival of a bunch of what feels like drugged up people just having the times of their lives. And just weirder and weirder things just begin happening. As it grows dark, you see around you all of the lights just everywhere, and as Numel seems to be one of the kinds that after a little while, he just kind of thinks about the world, and then he seems to completely stop giving any fucks as he just undresses. This super old ratchety man just begins dancing, and as he's dancing, all of the lights that he kind of conjured up begin kind of moving and dancing with him. It becomes fairly epileptic. And between them, eventually you start seeing, as within the thoroughfare, the stones kind of break a bit, And between them, you watch as these shrubs begin growing, and then as they reach a certain size, when these flowers pop out, you watch as the shrub kind of lifts itself out of the crack, and then just begins dancing as well. At this point, you feel this is a weird place to be. People are dancing. You think you saw someone get stabbed along the side, but you're not entirely sure. And as you look over, you do see someone. Seems to have been stabbed in the side, but it's not bleeding, and they don't seem to care. They're just doing their thing. The musicians have gone on to new pieces, of which all 4 of them are still not in tune with each other. One of them has this guitar kind of thing, and as he twangs on it, he's doing this super intricate melody, which can only just barely be heard over the whining sound of the accordion drum thing. And in the background, there's someone effectively just playing bongos. And the last person has what looks like a pan flute in some ways, although it's not from the shortest to longest. They're all the same length, but they have different widths. And as he blows into them, they each make very different sounds. You'd expect them to make fluting sounds, and the first few do in different regards, although they go down the registers pretty quickly. And the last ones start making a more kind of like trumpet or trombone sounds, as this player just switches between this delicate pan flute and just and it's all over the place. Everything is all over the place. The night drifts on. Nubel continues doing all sorts of interesting tricks as he conjures up actual fireworks, and then partway through he begins conjuring up fire, which you're worried about might cause a problem, but he seems to have it under control. You wonder if anyone has anything under control at this point. And as you just kind of drift with everyone else, time just seems to... The same thing seems to happen that also happened in the Shadowmar. It just... Time seems to lose sense and meaning. It just goes by. And you enter what you feel like might be a similar state to what everybody else is in. As you're just doing. You don't care. Everything works fine. You danced with some of the pixies beforehand. You think you were flying. It was really cool. At least until you vomited because you were upside down. That was unfortunate. That was also really weird when you then landed. You looked down at the vomit and it was kind of like glowy and ethereal, and people started dancing through it, but nothing happened. It was very fascinating in a very weird way. And just going through the motions, it was beautiful. Eventually, the music also sounded pretty nice. And you wondered why you ever thought that the music was pretty discordant at the beginning. It's beautiful at the moment. And you just go along with the flow. And eventually, you conk out. You come back to yourself. You're not sure how much later. It's reasonably silent at this point. Looking around, you see like hordes of people around this tree in all sorts of different poses on the ground. Some with like their butts stretched out into the sky, some of them just kind of sprawled, some of them everywhere. You have old man Numel against the side of the tree, just kind of sleeping there with one arm kind of holding him up because it's around a branch. You have most of the fair up in the tree somewhere. There's just random shrubs. And here and there, there's still 1, 2, 3 people that are still dancing. You're not sure what time it is. You look around, you don't sense the dust anymore. And around you, it's daytime. And you think back to the experience you had. You thought it was already day, but no, it was night when it started. But it was definitely day between then. You think it was also night again. Was it day again? You don't know. As you try to recall the things that happened, some of them come back to you, some things just don't. At one point, it's a complete blackout. You think you tried picking up the instrument with the weird whining sound? You tried playing it? It didn't sound very good. Even on your completely high mind, you were pretty sure that it didn't sound very good. But you didn't care, so you kept playing. And at this point, you kind of sit up. And you like rub your eyes a bit and you wonder, what time is it? What day is it? What year is it? Where am I even? And you look up and you see a figure in extremely ornate robes walking into the center. Elven woman. Middle-aged it looks like, although given that elves live a lot longer, middle-aged probably means over 1,000. And she walks into the center. Numel. Numel. Look, Numel. Kind of weaves her hand a bit and then thump, as Numel. What is it? What am I doing here? Looks down. Oh, I have no clothes on. Where have those gone? I guess it's just another Tuesday. He begins to get up, and and the other woman says, "No, Numel, you're an archmaester. You can't be doing this. We kind of need you to be functioning. Look, Numel, it's been a week. It is another Tuesday. This started on a Tuesday. Please, will you help me get all these people in order so that we can get the town working again? Look, I know you like festivals, and I know you like the lights, but did we really need this again? Let's get to work." And she turns around, and then she looks at you. How did you even get here? You're not supposed to be here. Oh, I know what this is. It's him again, isn't he? Why does he do this? He knows he shouldn't be here. And she like turns up to the sky. Lestrade! Lestrade, you can't keep sending people here. You know how much trouble they cause. Like, they didn't cause trouble. I know they didn't cause trouble this time, but this is a problem. You need to stop. You should make your way. I hope you had fun. Those festivals of lights are always cool, and believe me, knowing these people that want to do this every year again, I'm already not ready for it. This town is so much work. I guess that's what we get for living next to fairies. Good luck on your trip back. Clap. And you watch yourself as you feel yourself get pulled upwards, and underneath you, you see Torp vanish into the distance. And then below you see Torp and the Shadowmar and the Aldrin Coast, McKinleth, and then you zoom up further and you see Felwyn. And although at this point you're so far away, you feel like in your head you hear just the vaguest ending of a sigh, and you hear Soren Lestat chuckle as you get sucked up. You see Ruminara, and then it pulls you out of Ruminara and up through the bottle, and as you leave the bottle, feel yourself enter back into yourself. Beside you is Soren Lestrade as he takes the bottle, corks it up again. Oh, the High Lady isn't very much fun sometimes, but I always love those festivals. He tosses the bottle and fades. I hope you had fun today. This was a very silly story,